based on the answers, they did seem like a group that could listen to the evidence and reach a verdict, not based on prior feelings about the defendant.
Jessica, what do you make of potential jurors who seem to be trying extra hard to convince the attorneys that they can be fair? Would that raise a red flag to you, or should that approach to citizenship be commended?
I actually think it is to be commended that people are saying that they think they can be fair and impartial, notwithstanding some statements they have made in the past, perhaps on social media, pertaining to the former president. I think what has to happen, though, is that the parties have to evaluate whether they think that that actually is true, that the juror can put aside any previous feeling. But I think that it is to be commended that people are taking seriously what the judge is telling them, which is that they would only be seated if they could actually put aside any prior conceptions and decide the case based solely on the evidence.
But I also think it's good that the lawyers on both sides can look at the social media posts, because that is an indication of people's true feelings. They obviously weren't posting on Facebook or Twitter thinking that they were going to be on the jury. It's a good insight into what they really believe, and both sides deserve the right to know what people really think about issues relevant to this case.
Yeah, I would say the process is working as it should. I mean, that's really what we're seeing unfolding.
Alan, the foreperson is a man originally from Ireland, works in sales, says he gets his news from the New York Times, Daily Mail, Fox, and MSNBC. What do you think he will bring to that post? And is it, it's not unusual, obviously, in a city as big as New York to have jury members and a foreperson who's from someplace else originally?
That's New York. It's a melting pot. You have people from all walks of life. And a lot depends on what the personality is. Now, you might have jurors inclined to go one way or the other, but now it's really about the influence that each side thinks they're going to have in the deliberation. And what really struck me is, not to minimize the contributions of other jurors, New Yorkers are usually fully engaged. You have two lawyers that are already seated, and that's a risky proposition for both parties involved. And it could cut one way or the other, but some might think that this is a jury of two right now. Now, I'm not saying these lawyers are going to just dominate, but the other jurors will look to these lawyers for guidance. And if something comes in, a fellow juror makes an argument about something extra legal that's not in evidence, a lawyer might shut that down and get them to focus. Or lawyers like to argue. So if there's it's 11-1 or 10-2, if there's a contrarian personality by this lawyer, that lawyer might just keep the deliberation going. It's very interesting.
You know, Anderson, about a decade ago, Chief Judge Judith Kaye created a system where almost all exclusions, all exemptions from jury service were out. Their lawyers, we've both served on juries. I mean, everybody serves in Manhattan and in all of New York State now. And so you get a much more upscale jury particularly in Manhattan, which has a lot of high-income people in it, than you used to because there's so many fewer exemptions from jury service.
Jessica, I mentioned what some of the former president had to say outside of court today about the alleged hush money payments at the heart of the case. I just want to play a clip of that.
I was paying a lawyer and marked it down as a legal expense. Some accountant, I didn't know, marked it down as a legal expense. That's exactly what it was. And you get indicted over that?
So that
Is that incriminating?
Yeah, so that was an interesting statement. I don't think we should overstate how incriminating it was. I mean, his name, he signed some of the checks to Michael Cohen, reimbursing him for these fees. When he started to say, I marked it down as legal expenses, my ears perked up, because it's been a little bit unclear exactly how the state is going to prove that Trump falsified the records, because many of these entries may have been made by the accountants for the Trump organization. And Cohen is apparently going to testify that Trump was part of the scheme to falsify. It seemed there that Trump was saying that he marked it down as legal expenses, and then it seemed like he caught himself and said the accountants marked it down. So he may still argue that he was essentially relying on the advice of the accountants, or the accountants entirely on their own were marking it down as legal expenses.
But remember, the whole case is about the falsification of these business records. And, you know, Trump has potentially the argument, look, I run a multi-billion-dollar company. I don't know how the accountants, how the bookkeepers record things. That's going to be a big issue in the case. How is the government going to prove that Trump knew and initiated or at least supported the idea that these payoffs were recorded as legal fees. He said, mark them down. Now, you know, as Jessica said, he sort of caught himself, but, you know, that video could be played before the jury, no question.
假意赔时，满意后付款，支持全国复检。你还在专柜买动辄上万、十几万，甚至过百万的翡翠手。